Do you want to learn how to do flex fuel tuning on a Gen 4 ECU using HP Tuners? Well, that's what we're going to do in today's video. So we've got a 2014 model Chevrolet Camaro SS. This car is equipped with an LS3 that also has a BTR Stage 3 LS3 camshaft. This car is a TR6060 model, but we're going to pull this thing inside. We're going to go through the entire flex fuel tuning process using a DSX flex fuel kit, and we're going to put it on the dyno and see how much power it has. So let's go ahead on and jump in the car and get to work. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to actually enable the flex fuel sensor to make sure that it's actually pinned correctly and functioning. Then after that, the customer has actually already put, I think, 5 gallons of E85 in this car. So we're going to make sure that the ethanol content is reading, and then we're going to drive this thing over to the fuel station and go ahead on and fill it up all the way with E85. Then we'll strap it down on the dyno. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get in our tune file, and we need to go ahead on and activate the sensor. To do that, we're going to go to engine, we're going to go to fuel, we're going to go to flex fuel, and this first thing is flex fuel. We're going to enable it. Flex fuel sensor, we're going to actually, instead of it being virtual, we're going to call it a sensor. And for right now, we're actually going to leave these composition threshold and delay triggers and all that stuff. We're going to leave this at 0 at the moment. Now we'll turn those on at the end of the video. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead on and adjust our stoic point to our fuel. So we're going to go over to, it'll be fuel, general, and then stoic AFR. And I already had it set to 14.08. So just so you guys are aware, I've already tuned this car. I tuned this thing on pump gas already. And so the only thing we're tuning for today is going to be the flex fuel side of things. So in order to get our stoic point correct, we're going to go to the 0%, and the stoic point of gasoline is 14.7. And the stoic point of 100% E, or E100, is 9. So we're going to type in 9 right there. We're going to highlight all, and we're going to interpolate horizontally. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into fuel system. We're going to go into diagnostics, and we're going to enable this sensor diag. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow the car to actually throw a check engine light if we have a flex fuel sensor problem, because we want the car to let us know, hey, the flex fuel sensor is not working correctly. And also we need to turn on the code. So we're going to go to engine diag. We're going to go to DTC, and we're going to scroll down until we find our flex fuel sensor codes. So you're going to notice, you're going to see this P0178, P0179. This is flex fuel sensor circuit low and high. We're actually going to turn on our MIL for those. And let's just make them MIL on second air, just like how GM would have done it. So that takes care of that part. Otherwise, we're going to get into spark tuning and things like that, but this is the bare minimum that we need to make this sensor function. So let's go ahead and load this tune in the car. We'll pull up a scanner and let's verify that the sensor is actually working correctly. So that now that our tune file is loaded, we're going to go ahead on and we're going to start the car and get our data logger up and going and check ethanol content. Now again, if you haven't seen my other videos, when you want to activate your VCM scanner, you can connect and start recording just by hitting the spacebar button. All right, so there we have it. Ethanol fuel is actually reading. The car currently is showing in the 20s, and it's actually going up. So therefore we know that the ethanol sensor is actually correct. And you'll notice that air-fuel ratio commanded, our stoic point is changing. So everything's looking good. Let's go ahead on and get this car to the fuel station, fill it up with E85, and get it back to the shop and get it on the dyno. Got the car filled up with ethanol and up on the 4-post. I wanted to give you guys an overlook as to what all's done to this thing. Again, I've already tuned this thing on pump gasoline. So all we're going to be focusing on today is the flex fuel tuning itself. So we have a cold air inductions, cold air intake, BTR Stage 3 LS3 camshaft, inch and 7/8 speed engineering headers, freshly installed DSX flex fuel sensor, and this car is on stock injectors. So I know a lot of guys on the internet claim that you need larger injectors for E85 with an LS3. You in fact do not when naturally aspirated like this, unless it's got, if it's got, a high ram and ported heads, it would probably need it, but with this engine combination, the stock injectors will be completely fine. We'll probably end up right around 85 or 90% injector duty cycle, and if I do need more injector, all I've got to do is spend the $50 for the 1 credit to license the fuel pump control module and turn up base pressure at wide open throttle, and we'll have more than enough injector. So we're going to go ahead on and slide into the car and make sure everything looks good. So header's clear pretty good. Actually, we're sitting on the frame. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it looks like this passenger side header's on the frame, so we may get some false knock from that. Again, this is the speed engineering headers. This exhaust is the factory MPP exhaust. So everything back here should be good. Rear tires are pretty decent. but I don't see anything out of the ordinary. So let's go ahead on and get the wideband in and get the car strapped down. All right guys, so we're up in the car, got it loaded up on the dyno. Just currently making sure everything looks okay. We're obviously in open loop, but this car actually has an oxygen sensor issue, and it's actually learned this short-term fuel trim of 1.6% on the driver's side for some reason. So I'm gonna have to just keep that in mind. I've tried resetting long-term fuel trims. So in order to do that, you can just click the little power button up here. You can click fuel and you can hit long-term fuel trim reset, and it usually will drop out all of the closed loop learn, but it just hasn't. So we're just gonna work with it. No matter how many times I flashed it, like, it still comes back to this 1.6%. So I'm gonna do some tinkering around with it, but we're all currently on ethanol. You guys can see we're up to 70%. And so we're just on, we're on the exact same tune-up as what we did earlier in the video. There's no added timing, no nothing like that. So let's go ahead on, and we're gonna kind of get an idea of where we're at air-fuel ratio-wise, because again, our MAF curve was already dialed in on pump gas. So this will kind of give us an idea of where we need to be at for power enrichment on ethanol. So let's go and do a third gear rip. All right, so it looks like the car was actually spinning a little bit, which is kind of common on these. Because when I was looking through the log, like, we can actually go back and check it. If it was clutch, these lines would not be going up together. Our mile per hour and our RPM would not be going up together. So I think we're just spinning third gear a little bit, so that'll actually get the tires warmed up. Currently, my cell phone's actually on TikTok Live. For whatever reason, TikTok wanted me to go live for 30 minutes before I can even use their live studio to be able to help you guys with tuning. So if you guys are going to follow me, like, either whether you're on TikTok or you're on YouTube, over the next week or two, I will have everything set up to where once or twice a week we're going to go live, and I'll screen share with you guys, and we'll go over, you know, your tuning projects. And if you guys have any questions, we're going to go through all that. So if you're not already following me or subscribed, please go ahead on and do that now. So we're going to start the log back up again, and let's go ahead on and try to do a third gear rip again without spinning the tires this time. Much better. Now this car, we actually did a snap, crackle, burble tune, whatever y'all want to call it. So if y'all can hear it now, she's pretty rowdy on D-cell. All right, so we're gonna stop this log. I'm gonna bring the car back down to idle, and we'll get the car slowed back down. So you guys can see, so this is kind of one of those things where you can decide on how you want to tune. So technically, when we're tuning on flex fuel, again, I've already had this MAF curve. I mean, we were dialed in perfectly on pump gas. So the fact that we're on 71% ethanol now, and we're seeing the car trend lean, you have one of two things that you can do. So injector characterization actually changes with ethanol content. A lot of guys don't understand that. So if you look up some of the, you know, real quality injectors like Fuel Injector Development or ID, they will actually give you injector characterization data for ethanol and for pump gas. So this car is actually showing that we're running a little bit lean. So as we look through this data, if you guys will notice, we're actually out of injector. Now, you know, some of you guys may think, well, you said that we would be fine on injector. Well, we actually still technically are. Let's look a little bit deeper into this. So we've got our fuel pressure pulled up. Again, this car has a fuel pump control module. As we get up top, I mean, we're down to 40, 41 PSI. So had this car been able to sustain 58 PSI, we would be fine. Like, this car would still have plenty of injector, but the injector flow rate goes down. Like, it shrinks quite a bit as the fuel pressure drops like this. So we can actually pull up our injector data. We got an engine, fuel, general, flow rate versus pressure. And if you look down here, now this is in KPA, but just know that, I mean, we're basically down to in this area on KPA. Here, we'll switch this over to pound per hour, since a lot of you guys will know pound per hour. So we've actually shrunk these injectors down to in the mid 30s, where these things should actually be 42. So if you look at that percentage as to how far off that is, I mean, you're talking, we've lost like 25%, maybe 20, I don't know, not as good with math in my head, but we're down like 20 or 25% on injector flow rate due to the fuel pressure drop. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead on and pull out the fuel pump control module file, And I'm gonna see if I can spice up this fuel pump a little bit more, but we may actually be out of fuel pump. So some guys will get away with, what will happen is because the fuel pump still technically has pressure up here, because we're still at 40%, if we were to put an injector that's big enough to handle the fuel pump drop, then that would work as well. So it may, if I can't get this fuel pump control module dialed in, we may end up having to just go ahead on and put a set of LS9 injectors in this thing. That's usually the one, the LSA LS9 injectors. That's usually a good injector that'll handle this. But again, we should not be out of injector right now. We're only out because this fuel pressure is dropping. So let me get this fuel pump control module file pulled out of it, and we'll go through the file and see if I can get it cranked up anymore. All right, so just got the fuel pump control module read file pulled out of this thing. If you notice a couple things, so max desired pressure, you can see it falls as fuel flow rate goes up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna increase this. I'm just gonna make this, we'll just make this 500. The open loop duty cycle, so if we look right now, well, I'll probably end up having to increase this more, but we have fuel pump trim, short-term and long-term trims. So right now, the long-term trim is showing that it's already adding 6%. So we can go to this open loop DC, and we can just go ahead on and add that 6% onto here. And what I'll do is I'm actually gonna start logging the fuel flow rate, and we'll try to tune this fuel pump in some more to get it to maintain. So that's gonna be, right now, all I need to adjust on this. We can actually go ahead on and just change the regulation pressure. We're going up to 500 kPa on it. And so I'll load this in, and I'm also going to save this file, save as. We'll just call this mod. I didn't read it out as a whole. So we're going to pull up our tune file, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into desired fuel flow, make sure these are actually one, they are, okay. And then fuel pressure, we're gonna change our, we'll change our high flow. I'm just gonna go up to 500 kPa. And so I'll tune on this low flow and high flow. I don't know if I'll show you guys on video, but that's the adjustments I'm gonna make right now, and we'll see if we can stretch out this fuel pump a little bit farther. So made the changes to the fuel pump control module. Sorry for the loss of video on that one, which y'all probably don't really care about watching my face anyways. But I had a USB-C, like the cable failure, and it was messing with the GoPro. So anyways, we're back up on the dyno in vehicle simulation. Let's go and do a third gear rip and see if those changes help fuel pressure at all. All right, so as we saw, I mean, fuel pressure obviously come up with the fuel pump control module changes, which brought injector duty cycle way down. But up top, we're just out of fuel pump. So next thing I can do is we can try to turn up the voltage on the alternator and see if that helps. So where we're gonna do that at is gonna be, pull up our actual tune file again. So we're gonna go under system, then general, then we're gonna have our fuel system voltage minimum. So right now we're at 12.5. Let's just go 13.5 right here, and we'll see if this alternator can do it. We'll just go to 14.5 right here. We can do the same thing with airflow system voltage. Let's bump it up a full volt. All right, let's see what that does. I know you can't see me. It is what it is. So we got to keep this video going. The GoPro actually is getting hot. So I think when that other USB-C cable shorted, I think it really got the GoPro hot. So anyways, I've made the battery voltage change, and we are now logging control module voltage. So we're gonna see how this voltage looks like whenever we go wide open throttle. right, so as we look through, we will see that fuel pressure was better. We had a peak of, I mean, we hit 100% injector duty cycle, so we're still technically out of fuel pressure, but because fuel pressure is dropping, we're actually out of fuel injector right now. So we had 13.72 volts. That may be all we can get out of this alternator, but we're at 48.7 psi now. So if you look, I mean, we're actually starting to get in the ballpark of I'm not going to call this safe by any means, but if you notice, we went from being at like 97 or 98 lambda and 40 psi to now we've gained another 8 psi, and we're up to 0.89. So if that shows you how fuel pump control module tuning can actually help. So obviously we're still on essentially pump gas timing right now. So I can try to command a little bit more voltage on this thing to see if we can get anything else out of this alternator, but I just don't think it's gonna do it. So realistically, again, if we could have another 10 psi or so, if we could just maintain the factory, 58 psi of fuel pressure, we'd have had more than enough injector. But this car is just not holding. This car's got, I think it's got like 90,000 miles on it. So I'd say the fuel pump's probably getting a little bit weak, because I haven't had an issue with these cars before, being able to hold fuel pressure and maintain injector duty cycle and everything being good. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead on and I'm gonna see if I can get any more out of this. And now you can see instantaneous fuel flow. I mean, we're at 41 grams per second of fuel flow. So that's where we need to make the adjustments at. So again, I'm gonna go ahead on and try to turn up battery voltage some more and see if we can squeeze anything else out of this fuel pump. So GoPro cooled back off enough for me to have the video going again. And where we left off is I had turned up the battery voltage. I had tried to command it to 14.5. It was able to do 13.7. As you guys seen in the data, we actually ended up with more fuel pressure. So this side of tuning, it does in fact work. Again, if we were able to hold the 58 psi, we wouldn't need more injector, but the simplest thing for this car is probably going to be just to go ahead on and get an LS9 injector or LSA injector. They're fairly inexpensive, but again, it's really just a band-aid. Like, we should be able to maintain, our adequate fuel pressure throughout the pool. So I've turned up voltage, so we've got that. So you'll see now control module voltage. I mean, the car right now is able to hold 14.5 just sitting here. So hopefully it can do that during a pull. If we can maintain voltage, I mean, us picking up another, 1.5 volts should add another like 20% fuel flow to this fuel pump. Let's see what we got. All right, so we're gonna watch fuel pressure right here. Obviously, I'm watching the wideband too. Again, on E85, some of you guys, may have seen where the car went 97 lambda and start freaking out. But this is ethanol; like, it honestly doesn't care. Obviously, the car would make more power, at the correct lambda. But we're not putting the engine in any type of territory where it'd be upset. All right, so let's do a third gear rip and see where we're at. I'm gonna start the rear camera. Alright, so as y'all see, we're actually maintaining air-fuel ratio now. Fuel pressure is now 54.4. The car is actually in a territory where it's maintaining. Not saying this is the correct way by any means, but if we look up at our control module voltage, we were able to maintain 14.64 volts. So, I mean, again, I hope this justifies to you guys how good fuel pump control module tuning is. So we were almost able to get up to that 58 psi. I mean, I can try to stretch it out a little bit farther. So I may try one more go around of trying to get this up. But again, I've already showed you guys what I'm doing. I'm just increasing voltage to the alternator, the commanded voltage as I showed you earlier. And we've turned up fuel pressure in the fuel pump control module to where if the car's capable of getting up to that fuel pump fuel pressure, that we can run it. So that's why you'll see where we're commanding 73 psi. I never expected to to need 73 PSI. We should have been okay. 65 PSI or so should have actually been able to get us to where our injector duty cycle would be in that, you know, 80, 85%, like what I was hoping for. So I'm gonna keep working on this thing though, but as you're seeing, I mean, we're up now 14 PSI of fuel pressure over where we were at when we first started. So there's definitely some validity to keeping the fuel pump control module. And for you guys that are doing the 4 fuel systems, please keep your fuel pump control module. That way you can actually watch the fuel pressure like this live, because your ECU actually looks at pressure delta across the injectors to determine injector data. So the more data you give this ECU, the better off it's gonna be. All right guys, we're on the last test. So I made an adjustment to the pressure ramp to try to get it to where it doesn't try to slam so much fuel pressure in down low. I don't know if you guys understand this or not, but fuel pumps actually move more volume at lower pressures. So lower the pressure that this pump drops down to, the more volume it can flow. So therefore, again, the solution is either gonna be injectors or fuel pump. But I've adjusted battery voltage. I'm gonna try to get it to maintain control module voltage like it's supposed to. And hopefully this last pressure adjustment, we can just squeak that last little bit out of this thing. But I want you guys to know, even though I'm not showing it on video, it's the same adjustments I was making earlier. I'm just obviously turning things up more. Like on the duty cycle and all that stuff, I'm just adjusting as I can. So we're gonna go 3rd gear again. I'm just gonna watch control module voltage. Alright, so kind of the same thing. About 55 PSI is about all we're going to be able to get out of this thing, when I was hoping we could get 65 out of it. Got the car where it's actually in a safe territory now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the customer to, honestly, probably the cheapest and easiest thing would be just to do a drop-in ZL1 pump into this car. But we're safe enough now, so let's go ahead on and put some timing in this thing. Obviously, you know, we're maintaining air fuel, so let's put some timing in this thing, see if we can pick up some power. GoPro issue should be resolved now. Apparently it was just dead. I had it on the charger last night, but I guess I didn't have the battery pushed all the way in. So go figure. Anyways, talk to the customer, explain to him what's going on. I explained to him that we're dropping fuel pressure below what I had anticipated on being able to run, which is 65 PSI of base up top. So he fully understands. The best solution for him is going to be just to do the pump swap versus trying to dick around with the injectors. So he's going to pick up the car later on, and they'll eventually do a ZL1 pump in here. So for now, I mean, he can just run like a little bit lighter of a blend on ethanol. He can do like an E50 blend or so. So let's go ahead on and finish the tuning process, since we are actually able to have the car maintain target air fuel. If you guys didn't see it, after the battery voltage changes and the pressure changes, we've got the car to where it's maintaining 85 lambda. Now, yes, we are at 102 or 101.2% injector duty cycle. So we're using all of the injector right now because of the fuel pressure being 10 PSI below target. But as of right now, we're still able to maintain air fuel. So I'm going to go ahead on and show you guys the power enrichment side of flex fuel tuning and the spark of flex fuel tuning. We'll go ahead on and do a dyno pull or two, and then that'll conclude the video. So for right now, I'm going to show you guys power enrichment on ethanol. So we're going to open up our tune. We're going to go to fuel, power enrich, and you will notice that we have EQ ratio gas and EQ ratio alcohol. So this is the commanded EQ ratio that I command on most LS3s. Sometimes I'll actually have them a little bit richer up top and hold out a little bit longer. But for the most part, this power enrichment table does pretty well on these. So I've already copied this table and moved it over into the EQ ratio alcohol table. So if you need to make any air fuel adjustments on ethanol, ethanol actually likes to be rich. So what I always do when I have the fuel available is I will add fuel, and we'll just keep richening up the commanded EQ to the point where the car starts to lose power. But usually, I mean, I can run these things, you know, 0.8, 0.81 lambda, and they still seem to love it. So that's the power enrichment side of things. Let's go ahead on and go over to the spark timing side of things. So what ethanol tables do is they're going to look at your high octane table, which this is my current high octane table right now. And it's going to be a multiplier over to this. So right now our table is 0. So it's going to look at this table, and it's also going to look at this alcohol. And this alcohol table right here is only when in power enrichment. So if you guys are wondering what this table is, it's only when you're in power enrichment. So I personally like to make timing changes here. And I'll have the table to where, say we're targeting, I don't know, like a 26 or 27 degrees up at peak. And then if I want to do some testing with a little bit of additional timing, I'll actually add the timing over on this table for just alcohol only. This right here is a multiplier, so it's multi versus composition. So basically this is telling you how much the ECU is weighing itself over into that flex fuel table also. So something like this, it being an NA car, it can honestly, a lot of guys don't understand this. I've had this in other videos, but realistically, especially in an NA car, anything over E40, they're gonna make about the same amount of power. So I'm gonna set this thing up to where we're at a 1 multiplier, anything above E50, and 20% ethanol, we can have a little bit extra timing there. So I'm gonna go ahead on and I'll interpolate over. Let's, actually, let's just make this we'll do a 0.3 multiplier on that. Again, that's my personal preference. You can do what you want. A lot of guys will have it as a 1 multiplier at 80, and they will just kind of interpolate over like this. Some guys will do it to where E10 is still at 0, and they'll do interpolate over like this. You play with your own vehicle. I just want to show you guys how the multi-table works. So what I'm going to do is we're going to work on the high octane table. So I'm just going to build this table really quick. So what I like to do is I'm going to save the current file that we're on, and I'm going to look at a timing row that I like where I think it can make good power. So let's go 0.6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Now again, this is my way of doing it. You can choose your own way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this at 1.36 grams. And we're going to actually just interpolate like vertically. And so now we know the car is going to have plenty of timing coming in here. It's going to come in at 28 degrees or so, which sounds excessive, but again, this car's on ethanol, and LS3s actually, to a certain extent, they'll like 27, 28 degrees below peak torque, and they'll like 26 or 27 up top. So this right here should handle us perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the same tune that we've got in front of us right now, I'm going to put it as our compare file. And where we saved it, it's still going to have the original high octane table in here. So what I'm going to do is, now that table is in the background, we're going to show our differences, and I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to copy it, and I'm actually going to paste this into flex fuel table. So what it's going to do is once we've achieved our 1 multiplier, our high octane table is going to look just like the table that we just created. So we're going to add this in right here. And so now that we have this, we're going to go back to our high octane table. Now don't miss this step, and we're going to put this back. So now we have a good solid flex fuel multiplier table in there. Now again, I may add a degree or so and test it, but if I do that, it's going to be on this table right here. So I'm going to save this as 3. I'm going to load this into the car, and then we're going to do an actual power pull. Tune file is loaded in, dyno is set up and ready to go. We're going to do a 3000 to 6600 pull. I'm going to do 4th gear, and we're going to have the eddy brake on, basically set up to where this is going to be an inertia only pull. Let's let it rip. All right, so we're looking through the data. Everything looks clean. As you guys can tell, we actually did maintain air fuel ratio. You'll see we got to a peak of 26.5 degrees. Now this is showing just a little bit of knock. More than likely that's going to be false, because again, we're on ethanol and we're still, I mean, I've seen guys time these things at 30+ degrees. So let's get out and see what kind of power we made. All right, it looks like we made 436.9 horsepower, 399.2 foot-pounds. Now again, if you're new here, this is a Mustang dyno, so this reads 10% low. So that would work out to right around 475 to 480 wheel horsepower on a Dynojet. If I remember right, this car on pump gas had made, I believe it was 422. Now it was on another dyno tower, like the PC for the dyno is different. So I don't have the comparison file that I can pull it up to, but so that looks good so far. So what we're gonna do is I'll probably try another degree, and again, I'm just gonna add it to the alcohol adder table, only when in power enrichment. So I'll add another degree and we'll do another pull and we'll see if it picks up. All right, just to make sure you guys see what I'm talking about, we're gonna click alcohol right here. This is the commanded EQ. So this is basically our commanded power enrichment. So we're just gonna go like right here, and I'm gonna go from, now again, I'm basing this just off of what I know. You know, I've tuned thousands upon thousands of 5th gen Camaros. So I'm just gonna try to get in the ballpark. We're gonna go from 3,600 up. So at 3,600 up right here, we're gonna add a degree and load that in. So this should be our final pull. So what we're gonna do is I've added that degree of timing. Dyno is still set up for 3,000 to 6,600. So we're gonna do this pull. If it picks up, great. If it doesn't pick up, then that's okay. I'll put it right back. But this car's not gonna need much more adjustment. We'll let her rip. Car slowing back down. As y'all can hear, I mean, this car shoots fireballs like it's pretty badass. So anyways, we're still cruising 85 Lambda. Obviously injector duty cycle is still ridiculous, but let's get out and see if we picked up any power at all. So 437.9, 400 foot-pounds of torque. So as you guys can see, we picked up one number. Complete waste of time on adding that degree. But again, you know, I've tuned literally thousands of 5th gen Camaros. This is my 17th year tuning. So I knew right about what it was gonna want. So I'm gonna pull that degree back out and get this thing unstrapped. And also, if anybody's curious, this is what the dyno is spitting out. This is crank values. So it's thinking that it's making right around 541 flywheel horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque, which if you guys watch Richard Holdner or anybody like that that does some, you know, testing on engine dynos, that's probably right in the ballpark. So you'll see this is with weather correction factor, which is what we're gonna want. This is uncorrected right here. So this is what I'm printing out for the customer. All right, that's gonna wrap up the video on the Camaro. I'm gonna unstrap this thing. I don't really even need to test drive it. Obviously, I've already driven it. So I'm gonna unstrap it, get it outside, let the customer come pick it up tonight. Again, I've already explained to him everything about it, the fuel pump and or injectors, whatever he decides to choose. But I'm gonna go ahead on and get home, hang out with my son, probably go eat some Mexican food. You know, Daddy loves his Mexican food. Anyways, thanks for the likes, the comments, subscriptions. I'll see you guys tomorrow.